When you first went into making the film, were you also maybe conscious of the outside perceptions of Branson to those who were even aware of what was going on in Branson as far as it being a real huge hub of entertainment?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think no matter where you live, even maybe if you live in Branson, you have a kind of sense of what it is, and that sense is incomplete. And so we knew we wanted from the beginning. I mean, even before we'd really figured out the stories we were telling, we wanted to make a film that would sort of surprise everyone, that would surprise people who lived in St. Louis and New York and Branson itself. Yeah, I mean, it felt like, a film that, I think, my politics are much more radical than anybody on screen in this film, but it felt like, there's also a lot more diversity even in the place. Branson is the core of red state America. I mean, it's a city that prides itself on that. And so I think finding, diversity within that actually felt interesting, felt unusual, felt like a surprise.
And it wasn't, that's actually not what David and AJ sort of set out to find. Initially we thought the movie was going to be sort of, I think, going out after youth subculture in Branson. What these guys found out after time was that if you are young in Branson, you're working with your family, and your values are probably a little bit different than maybe somebody's on the coast or whatever, and you're just concentrated more on that. And the story sort of developed from going in search of what do you do if you're a skate punk in Branson, Missouri? The answer is you probably don't exist. To finding these wonderful, rich, layered, nuanced stories with these families. And, I don't think it's a story they set out to tell, but it evolved over time, and it became the story that they were probably meant to tell.
So thanks in large part to Matthew. We had the luxury of going down to Branson sort of with an open scope. We just went down and we moved down there, started living down in Branson and just meeting people. And we would just bounce around and talk to whoever would talk to us, and one person would introduce us to another person. And probably we at least did interviews, on-camera interviews with 30 or 40 people. And any one of them really could have had their story told. I mean, there's some great stories out there. But, gradually we pared it down, and gradually we found the stories and the people who we felt like were going to best, a variety of things that we had the best access to, that we thought had the most interesting lives, and that would sort of tell the completeness of the story we were looking at. And we didn't really make our final decisions until obviously well into the edit.
Did any themes emerge as you were crafting that?
I mean, I think, people can maybe see lots of themes in it, but for us, I think this movie became a lot about family. And that was something, a through line that really resonated with both AJ and I quite a bit. Our first trip down was November 2007. And our last trip down was basically November 2012. So it was 5 years, all the way. I think that we thought it would be shorter. I think every filmmaker thinks it's going to be shorter, and hopes. But one thing we found was that first year, which we shot a lot in 2008, and other than the kind of pretty stuff and some of the B-roll stuff, not much of that footage is in the movie. It really took that whole first year to get people to trust us, to get people to let us in, to really get past some of that initial awkwardness and get at the true stories.
Well, they are here. How do you know when when your film is over?
It's tough. I mean, life is always going to go on. So you kind of try to find these moments and these beats that feel semi-complete. But we made a really conscious decision to not put in the sort of like end titles that say where are they now, because we feel like we wanted the film to function in some ways like a fiction film would function. And you pick a start and you pick an end, and if you've done it right, hopefully it feels complete, even if their lives aren't over. All of the hit songs that are in this movie were we used fair use laws to cover us on those. So we didn't pay rights for those songs because we couldn't tell the story without those songs. In doing that, you limit yourself in certain ways. That the music has to be playing when you're seeing them playing it, and you can't kind of extend it past that. You can't use it as a bed for other scenes. But yeah, and then the score of the movie, the kind of haunting a cappella music that you hear, is a group called Mountain Man. It's 3 young women who lived in Vermont at the time they recorded this. The album's called Made the Harbor. Almost the entire album is in the film, and you can buy it right now on iTunes. So I suggest you go home and get it. It's fantastic.
And that's a good segue a little bit to Nathan Truesdell, who's one of the other producers and one of the shooters, and did the additional editing, who's also in St. Louis and couldn't be here. But Nate popped in a Mountain Man track early on, and AJ and David just fell in love with it. And then it just kind of kept working and working, and then it just sort of fell into using that beautiful, haunting Appalachian sound that those women put together.
I think we started just exploring, and again, as with the characters, when we got there with our cameras, I mean, that was sort of my favorite part of making movies, I think, is just that feeling of running around with the camera and having that kind of anything is possible moments. And, one of my favorite shots in the film is a shot at the beginning of the people on the inner tubes at the water park floating in the pool. And, that was really early, when we went to that water park and we were kind of exploring, and at the last moment, as we were about to leave, I saw this sort of weird perch above the lifeguard stand with this kind of view out in the pool, and I ran up there with the camera and kind of climbed up. And just something about that rhythm and the way that felt, I think we found that rhythm in a lot of other shots and that pace.
And the Branson folks that you see in the movie were really appreciative of the way David and AJ and Nathan captured their town and their area, because there's some hauntingly beautiful shots there, and if you haven't been to that part of this country, you wouldn't necessarily know. So I think the visual language that they finally found in that rhythm, it's very elegiac, and it's very methodically paced, and that's sort of the way that Southern Missouri feels sometimes.
The film hasn't, it didn't show True False. The film hasn't shown publicly in Branson yet, but before we finished, we took it to Branson, we took a rough cut to Branson, and we showed it to all of the main subjects. And we had told them all basically that we would do that we made no agreements about, having any cut or anything like that, but we wanted them to see it, and we would listen to their opinions. And we were very, very nervous. But we showed it to all of them, and they all liked it. And I think they all, more than just liked it, they all felt it was honest. And so they felt like we had captured their lives, we had captured their town, and whether they, felt good about one part or not another part, that we had done what we set out to do. So that felt wonderful, and we're in touch with all of them still, and they've enjoyed the film. Thank you all so much.